Hello and welcome back. So today I wanted to make a different kind of video, still data oriented, still focused on draft strategy, but I wanted to backtest the approach that I've been discussing in the previous videos to see if any of it makes sense. So last night I was browsing YouTube and I stumbled upon a video by OwnersBox. They're a YouTube channel doing a lot of fantasy content. You should definitely go check them out. If you haven't already, I'll link them in the description below. And this is a mock draft that they did almost a year ago for the 21-22 season. So last night I, partially drunk, sat back and watched what unfolded and became clear that this was a solid case study for what I'm trying to do. So we have in this video 3 different draft strategies that you're going to see unfolding in real time. And you can see not only each player in this draft and what strategy they're choosing, but also which specific players they target, which players are left on the board at a particular range. And this will be an excellent exercise in preparing you for your draft, especially since we, the viewers of this draft, know how the 21-22 season panned out. So the purpose of this video is not to ridicule or shit on the 3 guys that made these strategies and drafted these teams, but it's really to evaluate those strategies themselves and how effective they are and explain the differences between those strategies and the data draft strategy. And at the end of this video, we'll take a look at the 3 teams that they ended up drafting, the draft position of where they got the guys that they got, and the end Yahoo rank of each of the 3 teams that they drafted, and see who came out with the best team and what I would have done a little bit differently. So as we continue to the video, again, you should probably check these guys out. They're a pretty good channel. I'm not going to lie. Watched a couple of their videos so far. But we're not going to go through and watch the entire video, but let's just start here. Let's look at the players that are this is the I guess this isn't Yahoo. I'm not sure exactly what website they're using, but these are the guys that were on the board at the beginning of the draft. So you can see a couple of these guys are positioned in a very bad spot, like Vasilevsky. That's not a good pick there, as we know, and we went over in the first video in this data draft series. There's a number of names as you go down through. This is typically what it looked like last year for most of the drafts. I did a couple of them. I did, maybe a handful of mock drafts, and I did 3 regular drafts, and this is pretty much what you saw. A lot of the guys going in this range. So as we skip a little bit ahead, this is what happened basically in the first round. So we have the 3 hosts. This is Jeremy. He's picking 6th. This is Drew. He's picking 3rd, and then this is Brody, and he's picking 11th. So right out of the bat, McDavid, Draisaitl, no, I wouldn't do anything different there. That's 1, 2. You should pretty much always pick those 2 guys. Number 3, Nathan MacKinnon. I immediately didn't agree with that pick. There's a lot of people that like Nathan MacKinnon. He's basically never been a 1.3, 1.4 point per game guy in the regular season. He does that in the playoffs for some reason, but he never does it in the regular season. So if you're picking him at 3rd, you're banking on him putting up a career year. And he was injured a little bit last year. He still did really well. He wasn't terrible. He wasn't bad. That's still a good player to pick. I just wouldn't have gone there necessarily. And then you see the crucial mistake. Team 5, that's an auto draft team, picking Vasilevsky at 5th. So Jeremy, this guy right here, picks Pasternak in the 6th round. That's a decent pick. He's a goal-scoring winger, as we discussed in one of the videos on this channel. And then we're going to watch here as Brody starts to make his pick here. I turned the volume way down. You can go and look at this video yourself and watch it if you are really interested. I'll just skip a little bit ahead. So he picks Cale Makar, and that's a little bit difficult because you're looking at maybe a slight overdraft, but that's where he's going. He's 11 or 12, and he ended up right in that range at 11 or 12. So if you're getting him there, I mean, you're not necessarily reaching because you're getting the best defenseman in the league. He has a career average of basically a point per game. He was over a point per game last year, and he led the NHL defenseman in goal scoring. So it was a good pick, and I like that strategy. And then he pairs him up with Mitch Marner, who's a point producing winger. And as we said before, wingers are more valuable than centers in your draft, so you probably want to go that route. And one of the things as I watch this, Brody seems to pick some of the better players on teams that are a little bit older, that have a little less name value. The Pittsburghs, the Washingtons, players that are still producing. They're still good, but they don't have that sexy name appeal of like a, Tim Stützle, somebody new and exciting and fresh. And it seemed to pay off for him a little bit. He had a pretty good team at the end of this, as we'll get to in a little bit. As this comes back around, Crosby, that's a solid pick. These are auto drafts, all these other ones here. These are the guys still left on the board here, and there's a ton of value. You can see guys like Fox. You can see, I think Zibanejad's a little too high there. Jeremy picks up Barkov in the second round. That's a really good pick. Barkov, I think he's a better two-way centerman in real life than he is in fantasy, but he's still a really good fantasy center. And we're just, I'm not going to subject you to all of this. But as we pause here in the third round, let's take a look at Andrew's second pick, John Carlson, excellent defenseman. I would have taken Fox over Carlson, to be honest, because the snake is going this way and then coming back around this way, and Carlson was there, Fox was there, both good defensemen, both fit the profile of what we covered in our video about two elite defensemen. So he got his first one in that range. This is 19, I believe, 19-20. So that's where the first D went at 11. Then you're looking at 19-20. The next couple D went. And then Andrew pairs him up with Steven Stamkos. Now, in this draft, they thought that was a little bit of a reach. That Stamkos was, maybe a little bit injury prone, and he is for sure, but he did have a really good year. What we know now, in hindsight, that was a really good pick in the third round, picking I wouldn't have necessarily gone with two centers like that, but those are two really good players to have, and it did well for him. Kaprizov was there in the third round. That's insane. And Svechnikov got drafted ahead of Kaprizov, which is also insane. And then Jeremy makes his first mistake of the draft and picks Max Pacioretty in the third round. I think that's way too high. I think Pacioretty's a solid 30-goal guy, and maybe that's the thought process there, but still a bit of a reach. As we fast forward a little bit, you can see Hedman taken here. This is 20? You're looking at late 20s here for Hedman. Hellebuck gets taken here, and he obviously didn't have a good season. So if you're looking at the goaltending so far, the goaltending in green, Vasilevsky picked way too high. Robin Lehner picked way too high. Darcy Kemper, that's pretty much where he was going, and he stayed at around that value by the end of the season. And then Hellebuck, he was drafted too high, and that's not at all a good pick by this auto draft team. Notice Brady Tkachuk got picked right here in the second round. Matthew Tkachuk got picked in the third round, and he was the better of the two. So it's kind of a crapshoot. One thing that you should note is if any, and this is not going to happen for a long time now, but if the Tkachuks are ever in a contract year, pick them up in fantasy because they put up career years and contract years. And Tkachuk was up for a contract this past season, so he absolutely destroyed his brother in the stats categories. You look at Brody's team here, Alex DeBrincat. I love that player. I think he's really underrated, not just for points, not just for goals, but he gets a ton of shots, and he actually hits quite a bit for a skilled, undersized forward as well. And then you see Scheifele, that's a bit of a reach. John Tavares, that's a bit of a reach. He tries to go with Mark Stone here at the back end of the snake. And, if Stone had been healthy, that was probably a good pick. Stone just did not stay healthy. This is where some of the best goaltenders start going. As we mentioned in the goaltending video, these guys are reaching. You're reaching for goalies here. Here are where the elite guys are picking their goalies. In the fourth round, you got Shesterkin, Freddie Anderson. Those are two of the best goaltenders in the league last year, as we know now. And then you can see a lot of the defensemen are going here. So this is kind of a D run, a little bit of a D run. Quinn Hughes going first. Jeremy here picks Dougie Hamilton, and he leaves Ekblad and Yossi on the board, and that was a fatal mistake as well. Dougie Hamilton missed a little bit more than 20 games, or around 20 games, I think. And he ended up, he's a volume shooter. He's a good defenseman. I would look for him in a bounce back season this year, but last year, you're looking at Ekblad on one of the best teams in the NHL, and you're looking at Roman Yossi, who, knowing what we know now, he was, in my opinion, he should have won the Norris. Cale Makar should win the Norris every year, but Roman Yossi had an incredible season last year, and he did really well in fantasy as well. And then we're going to move along here. This is Kyle Connor in the fifth round. That's excellent excellent value. Goal scoring winger in the 5th round. That's exactly what you want to see. You look at, some more D. This is still part of that D run. Hughes, Hamilton, Ekblad, Yossi, Pietrangelo, Riley, Jones. When this happens, you need to grab one of them. You cannot wait. Some of these teams that are auto drafting are waiting. Jeremy has Dougie Hamilton. He's got 3D. Andrew, this guy right here, has 3 defensemen in the first 5 rounds. Now, he wanted to go D heavy in these first couple rounds, and he did that for sure. And he definitely picked some really good players. I'm not gonna deny that he picked the right players or anything like that. I just think that maybe this Seth Jones, if you would have taken JT Miller, he put up 90 some odd points. Although, to be honest, knowing what we know now, we would take JT Miller. Knowing what we knew then, Miller was not a 1.2 point per game guy ever in his career. So he had a career season. And then there's some interesting developments as we move along here with the goaltending. Varlamov is taken above Sorokin and Fleury. I mean, that's kind of amazing if you just look at the numbers this year. Sorokin was the second best goalie in the league. So that's a little bit interesting. As we move into the back end of the snake into the 6th round, Carey Price, I mean, that's injury, nothing you could do there. And that's an auto draft pick. But Brody's team is starting to fill out. He picks Jack Campbell. That was a pretty good pick there. He's a Leafs fan, so he picked Jack Campbell. It actually did provide a lot of value. And then he ends up picking Darnell Nurse. Now, he picks Darnell Nurse as his D2, which I wouldn't have done. I highly suggested you take Nurse as your D3 because of the category coverage. He gets hits, he gets blocks, he gets shots and points, but he's not a power play quarterback, and you need to make sure that your top 2D quarterback elite power plays. If they don't do that, then you should probably hold off and try to get somebody who does do that. A couple of names that you'll see that are drafted after Nurse, including on his own team, are better than Nurse, in terms of points, power play points, that kind of production. And as we move into we'll finish off the 6th round here. So Jeremy picks Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. He had Barzell here. I don't like the Barzell pick at all. He's just never been an offensive producer at the NHL level. He's never gotten above a point per game average, and he plays on a very defensive team. And maybe that's why they fired Barry Trotz, because he wasn't unleashing Barzell offensively. But he's, fantasy-wise, he's not a 5th round pick. He's, a much deeper play if you're looking to get him. But Nugent Hopkins at least has exposure to the top power play in Edmonton. So that was a smart thought process there by Jeremy. Eichel on the IR, getting picked in the 6th round. And what Brody was saying, I don't think he didn't pick him, but he was kind of auto drafted. He said that's good value for Eichel considering all these other guys. Look at O'Reilly, Backstrom, Nugent Hopkins. Eichel's better than all of them when healthy. It's just a matter of how many games you were going to get out of him last year, and you ended up not getting that many, but he was pretty decent when he did play. And then you look at Andrew's team. He picks up another defenseman, Jacob Chychrun. Now, Chychrun, if he did stay healthy, that's a lethal blue line. I mean, Carlson, Yossi, Jones, and Chychrun. The only thing is, if you're in a league with hits and blocks, you're not getting any of that on your blue line. I mean, a little bit from Seth Jones and a little bit from Yossi, but you're mainly getting offensive production out of all these guys. So it's just, about category coverage, which categories are you going to try to corner? And, he just went all out for points, and that's a decent strategy, but it kind of, it comes back to bite him a little bit as the draft moves on. Malkin auto-drafted here in the 6th round. That's actually a really good pick. When healthy, Malkin is still a point-per-game player. He doesn't stay healthy that often. I think he played in the 40-game range last year, but he was still right at a point per game. So if you see Malkin there, he, again, doesn't have that new, sexy, new car smell type of thing, but he is a point producer, and he will get you the coverage that you need for your categories. As we move into the 7th round on the snake, Andrew picks Blake Wheeler. I don't like that pick. And again, he's got 3 centers. He's got no wingers. So this is where this D-heavy strategy, he's going for all defensemen in the top 6 rounds, 4 D and 2 centers in the top 6. And we mentioned here on the channel in one of our previous videos, you need some elite goal-scoring wingers. And those kind of dry up in the back half of the draft. So to go 3 centers and 4D. That's not necessarily the strategy that we're focused on with the data draft method, but and Blake Wheeler didn't have a bad season. He just wasn't, there's a lot of guys on this list that were better value than that. If you look at some of the other goalies that are going here, Cam Talbot, not a bad pick there. Demko, I like that there. Samsonov, that didn't work out, but I can see the reasoning there. And then Grubauer, that was abysmal. This is exactly why you don't take risks on goaltenders in this range, because Grubauer is this guy's second goalie. So at least this auto-drafted team has Anderson, but he got Grubauer, who was the worst goalie in the league last year, and he got him in the 7th round when a ton of other guys are still on the board, and we'll look at a couple of them as we go along. Now, Brody picks Chris Letang here, and that's what I was talking about. So if these 2 picks were switched, I would be very comfortable with what he just did. So he's got Makar, Nurse, and Letang on his blue line. That's excellent value. He ends up with Campbell and Spencer Knight. Now, I've mentioned before on this channel, I don't particularly like Bobrovsky. I've kind of, I've done a little bit of digging into Bobrovsky's numbers, and last year he had a .913 save percentage, but he had the highest win percentage of any goalie in the league. So I'm kind of, I'm able to be, my mind is able to be changed by the data. That's one thing. I'm not stubborn. I don't like Bobrovsky necessarily because he screwed me one year, but Spencer Knight, I would have gone that way as well. He just ended up in the minors for a stretch, and if he held on to him towards the end of the season, he did bounce back and played some good hockey down the stretch, but that might not have been the best pick there, but I see what he was doing there. Jeremy ends up picking Torrey Krug, and his thought process was getting exposure to the St. Louis Blues power play, which is a good idea. But the problem is Torrey Krug and Justin Falk are both offensive defensemen that could, in theory, quarterback that power play. Krug missed some time, and so I think Falk ended up taking a lot of that PP1 time and ended up scoring, I think it was something like 16 goals last year, which was pretty high, and it surprised me a little bit. As we move through the rest of this round, you see some names here that shouldn't be here. Netchas, or however you want to pronounce that, he shouldn't have been drafted in the 8th round. That's an auto draft. Braden Shen, that's pretty decent value. Sam Bennett, not bad. Drew picks Tyler Seguin, and what you're going for with Seguin is shot volume. I'm sorry. He shoots the puck a ton, but he's just not been above a point per game guy in a couple years now. So I would have picked him a little bit deeper in the draft. Again, there's some other players. I would have picked Nylander over Seguin, and a couple of other guys. Caulfield, that's a little bit of a reach there for him. Lankinen, I wouldn't have gone there at all. Tarasenko, I was high on Tarasenko coming into last year, and he was over a point per game guy. So that's a good value pick there for this auto draft team. Nylander goes here in the 9th. That's excellent value. What ended up happening here, I watched the draft, so he auto drafted Blackwood by accident. So that's a terrible pick, but he didn't mean to do it, so I'll give him a pass on that one. And then Jeremy comes back with Ryan Ellis. So his D are now Hamilton, Krug, and Ellis, which isn't bad. But the problem is, knowing what we know now, Ellis was hurt almost the entire season. He didn't play. Hamilton was out for around 20 games, so he really did not get any value from his D, and he didn't get those elite power play quarterbacks where he could have had them. He could have had Ekblad, he could have had Yossi, Morgan Riley, McAvoy was here, Letang. All those guys are better options than everybody that he picked, but it's difficult to factor in injuries because you never know. And you're going into a draft this year, you can look at injury history, but it's not an accurate predictor of what's about to happen. So tough break there with these 3 defensemen. Brian Rust here is an excellent value pick. Philip Forsberg, I mean, he had a monster year. Goal scoring wise, he was one of those 40-plus goal guys who was a winger, and he ended up getting picked in the 9th round. So just pay attention to some of these guys that are still on the board, and we're in the 9th round of this draft. Klingberg, Werenski, I had Werenski, and I picked him right about the same range, and the thought process was the same. You're getting shots, you're getting power play quarterback for Columbus. Brody, again, so he likes the older players with the less sexy name value, so he goes with Kopitar. Kopitar was a very solid player last year. He did provide some value. Taylor Hall, I would not go there. He's just hasn't been the same since that 1 year in New Jersey. He's not bad, but he's not exactly a goal scoring. I don't know. He does everything off the rush, and he doesn't do. He's not on their number one power play as far as I know. So that would scare me off a little bit. I'm very high on Shabbat this year. It's very difficult to predict when this guy's going to pop off, but you can see the potential. Sergachev, he's going to get more minutes this year. Last year, I don't know if I would have gone there because he was basically a third pair left defenseman or a second pair playing his offside. Hurdle, that's a decent pick there. Jeremy comes back with Neil Pionk. I don't like that pick. In fact, Morrissey would have been the better pick there. Morrissey had a much better season than Pionk. Marchessault, that's a reach, but that's an auto draft. As we go through, Drew's next pick is Zach Hyman. That's a decent pick. It's just not. I think that's his first winger in the 10th round, and it's Zach Hyman. So this is exactly why you don't go D heavy and center heavy early, because his first winger is Zach Hyman, whereas other people, they have Kaprizov, Gaudreau, Gensel, Kachuk, DeBrincat. All these guys were taken in the 3rd, 4th round because there's not that many of them. So he ends up with Zach Hyman as his top drafted winger, which isn't necessarily the best situation to be in. But look at the goaltending value that just came up right after that. Linus Ullmark. So he had Blackwood. He could have gotten Ullmark. Now, Ullmark wasn't anything to write home about in terms of like elite goaltending, but he's on that Bruins team that has, I think it was the 2nd or 3rd best shot suppression numbers. And that tandem with Swayman, if you had handcuffed them, that would have been a really good play last year. But he missed out on that. Devon Taves, if you can just skip Devon Taves right here, that's incredible value. It's difficult to tell, I guess, that he would have had the season that he had, but knowing that he was playing with Makar, I would have, probably gone there just for the garden seat opportunity there. Then Jeremy goes with Carter Hart as his second goaltender. I can kind of get there. He's going for high risk, high reward with Demko and Carter Hart here. And I've done that before with Hart, and it just didn't pay off. And one year it may pay off, but for me, if I'm going to draft him, it's going to be as a G3, not a G2. Demko is, I think, a G1 at this point. But Carter Hart, not so sure about that. One development in this draft, Drew ended up picking a lot of Flyers. Now, Giroux was on the Flyers at this point, and later on in the draft, he gets a couple more. So a couple of these guys were pretty high on the Flyers, and they did not end up doing all that well. But it's very difficult to call that kind of stuff when you're in the middle of your draft and you're trying to pick. So one thing to keep in mind is don't try to take from teams that are kind of iffy. Well, are the Flyers going to be good this year? Well, everything's pointing in the right direction. No. Take the tried and true teams that are always at the top. Take the teams like Nashville who have made the playoffs every year since 2014. Take players from those teams because they're a lot more reliable, especially if you're using a higher pick to get those. Now, let's pause here. We are in the 10th round, and these are some of the guys that are still on the board. Tom Wilson, excellent hit coverage. Look at 195. That was the year before last. And so he's a big hitter, and he gets some offensive production. So he's a good player to have. But the best player to have this year for that exact category is Evander Kane. Now, he had all those allegations swirling around last year, so he was kind of seen as a do not draft for a lot of players. But look at the shots, 255, and he puts up a lot of hits as well. You look at Buchnevich, he had a point per game season. Bjorkstrand, I think, had a 30-goal season. Laine was close to a point per game. So there were some wingers down here, but they're higher risk, higher reward. Duclair's all the way down here. Batherson, not bad at that range. Brian Strome, you're getting access to Panarin on that line. Maybe not the best pick at that spot. Maybe you go with Fiala there. But there's a lot of good value on the this is just right wings. But you're getting some value here, but these are a lot riskier plays than the guys that you would have gotten in the 3rd or 4th round. So there are players that you can find here to fill in the other spots on your roster, but you're not going to get your top end 40 goal pace, 100-point pace guys in this range typically. Now, last year scoring was up, as I've mentioned in a couple of other videos. 44 guys hit that pace last year, so it's a little bit different the past season. Let's take a moment to stop here. This is the 12th round. So Brody's team, he picks up Jordan Binnington as his third goalie. That was not a good pick in retrospect. I see what he's doing. He's getting what he thinks is the starter on St. Louis, who should be the starter in St. Louis. And St. Louis is a good team, so he's expecting wins there. It just didn't work out, and that's the luck of the draw. You know, you go into it with a good thought process, and it just doesn't work out. He picks Line A here at the back end of the snake, and that's a good value. I mean, I like Line A better than Hall. I like Line A, knowing what we know now, better than a lot of these other guys that are going. And look at how many defensemen are getting picked in this range. All this purple, these are all defensemen. Tony D, I would have gone there because he was power play quarterback of that Carolina power play. Weegar, decent option there, auto drafted. Some of these guys, I just don't see what categories you're looking to cover with an Ekman Larson, a Vince Dunn, an Alec Martinez, an Ekholm, a Dahlin, Grzelcyk, maybe if McAvoy's not playing and he's quarterbacking that power play. Erik Karlsson's a high risk, high reward type of player, but he's kind of rounding into form. He's kind of getting back, not to his elite level, but closer to a point per game level. Fiala, Jeremy takes Fiala here in the 12th round. That's excellent value for Kevin Fiala in the midst of this massive D run. And you can see I've mentioned before, you got to get those two elite defensemen early, because look at these guys. None of these guys are elite power play quarterbacks. D'Angelo's good value here. Brent Burns is, he's going to shoot the puck a lot, and he does quarterback a power play. He will quarterback a power play this year. Karlsson will also probably quarterback a power play this year. But if you're looking at some of these guys, they're not the upper echelon defensemen that you want to have on your blue line. So what Drew did with his defensemen, he ended up, he had John Carlson, Roman Josi, Seth Jones, and Chychrun. Now he's safe. He can worry about other stuff. And look at who he picks up at the 12th round, Jacob Markstrom. So he screws up with Blackwood, but he ends up with Markstrom. So that really was an excellent pick. And then Jari went right after him. So these two goaltenders, two of the best, two that I mentioned in the most recent goalie targets video, as two of those guys that are going to get you 55 to 60 plus starts on a team that's a top 15 defensive team that gets 40 plus wins, not necessarily the goalie, but the team gets 40 plus wins. These guys are getting drafted in the 12th round. Now, that will not happen this year. These guys, as you're looking through the stats of what happened last year, these guys are going to be way higher up on the board, but just goes to show you can find value if you know what to look for. Markstrom was in the second year with Calgary. Very good defensive team. Sutter's coaching, so they have the good defensive structure. Tristan Jarry, same thing. I've mentioned him in that previous video. So you can find value with goaltending here. Unfortunately, these are G1s. These are basically like upper echelon G1s. Markstrom was the second best goalie in fantasy last year, and he was picked in the 12th round in this draft, so that's pretty incredible. As we move through the 13th round, Bobrovsky in the 13th round. Again, I've mentioned this many times, but that's excellent value. Even though I'm not really a fan, that is excellent value, and he did perform very well at that position. So this guy ended up with, this is an auto draft, but Talbot, Lankinen, and Bobrovsky. You just drop Lankinen there, and you have Talbot and Bobrovsky. You're getting wins and probably not much else. 911 save percentage with Talbot, 913 with Bobrovsky, but you're getting wins. So at least you're getting something. And then you look at Drew's next pick, Sean Couturier, battled some injuries. Very difficult to plan for that. I like the value potential there in the 13th round, but this is what I'm talking about. You can look at Bo Horvat in the 13th round. I think he was above a point per game player last year. And then look at all these goalies that are going here. And so it's kind of a crapshoot. Vanacek, bad. Swayman, good. Drieger, bad. Nedeljkovic, bad. Sort of started a lot, but he got shelled, absolutely shelled in Detroit. Got lit up for 9 or 10 goals a couple times. Kakinen, bad. Ottinger, good. But that was a reach because Ottinger was the 4th goalie on the depth chart for Dallas at that point. If you remember correctly, they had Holtby, Bishop, and Hudobin ahead of him. And so that was an auto draft, but it would have been a smart pick for whoever did that. Brody comes back with Joe Pavelski. He ended up, I believe, in the top 30 overall. So getting him in the 13th round is excellent value. So what he ended up doing is he did his 2 elite defensemen. He got his Darnell Nurse technically as his D3, had 2 goalies already. Then he picks his center. He picks a left wing, another left wing, gets a goalie, but he gets that depth center. Jack Hughes, he was a 1.15 point per game player last year, picked in the 14th round. Ryan Strome was, I believe, a 0.8 something point per game guy, picked in the 14th round. Again, you're getting access to Panarin last year. So these centers are there. They're there late, and they're quality centers that you can get late. Couturier, Horvat, Hughes, Pavelski, Strome, these guys, if you don't get them early, you can get them late, but you cannot get those elite point-producing wingers, and you cannot get those power play quarterback D early. But you can get goaltending, and you can get centers late. So as we move through the 14th into the 15th round, again, knowing what we know now, Chris Kreider in the 14th round is insane. But nobody could have predicted that. I'm a Rangers fan. I've watched him for 10 years, and I never in a million years thought he would put up 50 goals. Jeremy goes with Cam Atkinson here at right wing. Not a bad pick. He just doesn't have a lot of wingers. Like, he's got no right wings here from the 7th round on. He has Pasternak, so that definitely does help. Not a bad pick there. Gallagher is usually good for shots and hits and stuff, but he's just kind of not been the same after facing a couple injuries lately. Trocheck, I would look at him as the new Ryan Strome, getting Panarin access this year. And then Drew comes back with Teravainen in the 14th round. That's really good value at that point. And then this brings me to another point. I was thinking of doing another video on this, but it's very difficult to put that kind of a video together just because basically the strategy is don't pick rookies. And Lafreniere wasn't a rookie last year, but basically I tend to stay away from most young players. Now, every now and then you'll get a guy like a Mo Seider last year who was a rookie and was outstanding, and he was actually really good fantasy-wise. But for the most part, you're not going to get fantasy value out of a rookie. It's just too big of a learning curve moving to the bigger, stronger NHL. Lafreniere had not a terrible first year, but statistically, fantasy-wise, a terrible first year. And even last year, he looked really good, especially towards the end of the season and into the playoffs, but he did nothing for your fantasy team if you picked him there. Now, this is an auto draft, so he was probably the next guy on the board, but, in complete direct opposition to exactly what I just said, Tim Stützle, excellent value here at 15. He actually did put up a really good season. But that's the thing, like, how do you know which one of these two guys is going to pop off, Stützle or Lafreniere? You could say Stützle is going to get more ice time and more opportunity. That's true. But, some other guys got some opportunity as well, and they didn't perform at all either. Raymond was borderline fantasy relevant. Actually, he was pretty fantasy relevant for most of the season. Seider was as well. Stützle wasn't a rookie, obviously, but these younger players, it's very difficult for them to reliably put up points and perform for your fantasy team at such a young age. So it's usually better to go with the less sexy pick like a Victor Arvidsson or Jakub Vrana. That's a really good value in the 15th round for Vrana. Alex Wenberg, I have absolutely no idea why he was picked in the 15th round. As we move further into the 16th round, so Brody picks Ristolainen. That's a big hits guy. He got Mantha. He kind of makes up for that Mantha pick with Timo Meier. Now, Mantha got hurt, and there is potentially 30 goal potential with Mantha, but it hasn't shown itself yet. And basically, again, I would go play it safe more often than taking big risks like that. But he ended up making up for it with Timo Meier. How Timo Meier ended up in the 16th round of this draft, I have no idea. And I'm betting that he ended up somewhere similar in your draft last year. He won't do that this year. He was a very good player last year, especially for fantasy. So you can kind of pluck these really good players on bad teams late in the draft because people are going to kind of shy away from that. knowing that that team is probably not going to go anywhere. But you never know. I never thought Nashville was going to do what they did last year, and Philip Forsberg and Matt Duchene putting up the points that Duchene put up. So, that could be a strategy as well. If you're this deep in the draft, picking off the best players, the guys who are getting power play time on the bad teams, this is maybe a good strategy to use in these deeper parts of the draft. Merzlikins here, he's a bona fide starter, and you're getting him in the 16th round, so I like that value. John Gibson, same type of thing. I went over him in the last video that I did, but at least he's starting 50-plus games. Same with Merzlikins. Batherson's a good pick here, auto-drafted here. Jeremy goes with Noah Dobson. Now, he actually did perform really well, but a lot of that had to do with Pulock getting injured and Dobson taking over that power play. And I would venture to say that Dobson will probably be back on that power play this year, just knowing that he did perform really well, and he was actually a pretty good goal scorer in that spot. So maybe a guy to target this year if you're looking at that. Jaden Schwartz, I don't know. That's a pretty weak offense in Seattle last season, but that was an auto draft. Jeff Carter, auto draft. Joel Farabee. So this is, Drew, he picked a couple of Flyers. He had Giroux, Couturier, Farabee. That's kind of, unless it's an elite team that is going to be a top 5 or top 10 offensive team, don't try to stack multiple players from the same team one after the other, because if that team just has a bunch of injuries, like what happened to Vegas or what happened to Philly, then you're kind of, handcuffing yourself. And Farabee's a good player. He's going to put up points for you. But he ended up, not doing you're not taking much of a risk here in the 16th round, so I'm not going to crap on this too much. But just looking at the guy who got picked right after him, Dylan Larkin, he was a point per game center, basically. And this guy, Avery, who's actually the cameraman for these guys, he ended up picking Larkin at great value, kind of making up for that Wenberg pick. I think that was almost the end of the draft, if not the end of the draft. And they're just summing it up here. So what we're going to do now is I have gone ahead and looked at these teams and saw where these guys were drafted in terms of this specific draft and where they ended up in Yahoo rankings. Now, this is their draft was for a points league. Now, I don't have the details of what kind of scoring was in that points league, so this is just general Yahoo rankings that I found. So there could be a little bit of a discrepancy in terms of they were gunning for a specific type of points league, but nonetheless, this is how these teams played out at the end of the year. So you look at Jeremy's team, Pasternak, good player, but he lost a decent amount of value. Barkov, good player, held up pretty well, but lost a little bit of value. Pacioretty, he was hurt. So any of these asterisks, these are guys that didn't play a lot, that got hurt. So he had Pacioretty and Ellis, who didn't really play. So he lost, Hamilton was injured too, but he played 62 games. So I kind of, left him in there. So this is the difference between the two. And then this is the difference without the injuries. So I just took out the guys that didn't play like half the season. There was really no, clear threshold. It was just sort of like an eyeball thing. But you look at, some of these guys, minus 137, minus 119, minus 103. Demko held up pretty well. Krug, minus 108. Ellis didn't play. Pionk, minus 18. So that's not bad considering where he got him. Carter Hart, minus 337. Fiala, plus 79. So like I said, that was good value for Fiala later in the draft. Cam Atkinson, that's not bad value. Minus 47, but you're not giving up anything in the 15th round. And then Stützle and Dobson, the two last picks that he had were very good value. They did really well. Stützle ended up in the top 70. Dobson ended up 59. So not bad picks at the end, but those three guys were his only plus guys. Everybody else lost value. So his strategy, I don't exactly know if he clearly, had a strategy that he was trying to, work with. I'm sure he had one. He just didn't. I don't see the pattern in terms of Drew. He went with the D. So this guy, he had Carlson, Yossi, Jones, Chychrun. He was D heavy and center heavy early. And so he didn't lose a ton of value with McKinnon, didn't lose a lot of value with Carlson. So that helped. He gained a bit of value, even at a high pick. Gaining value up in this part of the draft is really good. And then he gained a lot of value with Yossi as well. Didn't lose much with Seth Jones. Chychrun got hurt, so he's pretty good all the way up until down here. Well, basically the only guys that he got really screwed with these, minus 409, whatever. These are guys that got hurt. Chychrun, Blackwood, Couturier, they all, didn't play a lot, but everybody else held up pretty well. Just didn't have it here with Gibson, Joel Farabee. Farabee was hurt a little bit, I believe. So he, those are the late picks. I'm not going to fault him for taking a swing at a guy there, but overall pretty good value at the top end of his draft. He didn't make any major mistakes between the first round and the 9th or 10th round, other than this Blackwood pick. So even though he got hurt, it was a pick he didn't really want to make anyway. So this is without the injuries. He, minus 375, not bad. You'd obviously like to be plus, but that's very difficult to do. That means you're gaining value on every single pick that you make in the draft, which is not likely. But as we go to Brody, he had a little bit better team here, minus 34 difference without the injuries. So this is more along the lines of what the data draft method is, in terms of he picked Makar. He did have to reach there, but he got the elite number 1 power play quarterback defenseman. Paired it up with not a goal-scoring winger, but a point-producing winger who didn't lose that much value. A goal-scoring winger here at plus 9. Mark Stone, kind of a jack of all trades. He does a lot of different things. He was just hurt. I do think that would have been a good pick in that range. And then he gets his first goalie off the board at the 5th round, because this is a player. So this is the 5th round. He gets Jack Campbell, and he holds most of his value. So that's exactly what we've talked about on this channel. So he, not in the first couple of rounds, because he ends up getting Letang late, but he does end up with Makar, Letang as his 2 power play elite offensive quarterback defensemen. He gets Nurse for the hits and the blocks, and he holds up his position of value. 50 plus 59 for Letang is excellent value. If Letang drops in your draft, just pick him. He's typically in that range every time. Unless he gets hurt, he's not going to screw you. If he gets hurt, then you're going to have to hold him on the IR. But even then, if he performs in the playoffs for you, he will probably be worth that pick wherever you get him, as long as it's not, up in this range. So then you look at Spencer Knight, minus 88. Like I said, he got sent to the minors. He came back later and kind of made up for that a little bit. And, probably would have been better if he didn't have that first half that he had. And then this is, getting those older players. Kopitar, not, he still has name value, but not the sexy new car smell name value that you see in a lot of the other players that are going before him, plus 44. So that's really good value in the 10th round. Taylor Hall, I was, kind of hesitant, didn't know what to make of that, but at 110, he's held up his value at that range. Jordan Binnington lost quite a bit of value. Like I said, I walked you through his thought process there. He was looking for wins on a really good St. Louis team. Unfortunately, Husso stole the net, and there was no way to predict that was going to happen at the beginning of the year. Laine was, he's streaky. That's the only thing that about Patrick Laine. He's going to get goals. He's going to get shots. Actually, he's not even a volume shooter. He's more of like a shot percentage kind of guy. But he's streaky. So that's the only thing. He'll, 1 month, he will be untouchable, and he will put up, 15 goals in a month or something, and then he'll go ice cold for a month or two. So that's the only thing about Laine, which is why he probably fell here. Then you look at Joe Pavelski, plus 124, and you're getting him in the 13th round. That's incredible value. And that was a really nice pick there. Mantha got hurt, so we'll ignore that 480. Ristolainen, minus 42, but he's pretty much your hits guy, so that's perfectly fine. And then Timo Meier, plus 166 with the last pick for him in this draft. That's incredible value. This is, again, what you can look for. Now, he's a winger, which kind of goes against some of the parts of this data draft strategy. But what you're looking at, again, and I mentioned it while we were going through the picks, good players on bad teams that Timo Meier had never popped off. He had been, a 0.6, 0.8 point per game guy, and he was on a bad team. So that's why he dropped a little bit in the draft. But now he's closer to a point per game guy, and he's still, he's on San Jose. So he's still probably going to be discounted. You're not going to get him in the 16th round or whatever, wherever he ended up, but you might get him in this, 9, 10, 11 range, and that could be excellent value for you. Now, we didn't really go over it while we were doing the draft. I looked at it a little bit, but this guy Avery actually outdrafted all of them. I mean, it's a little questionable. If he didn't make this Wenberg pick, he would have outdrafted all of them. He didn't actually outdraft all of them. I kind of was being facetious there, but the Wenberg pick was brutal. The Kubalik pick was not very good, and the Caulfield pick was a reach. But everything else he did pretty well on. So you look at Draisaitl, that's the guy to get there. Fox, that's a good guy to get there. He gets Kaprizov at the third round. That's really good value for Kaprizov. He got plus 15. Goudreau in the fourth round at plus 22. That's really good value. Those guys carried his team. These top four guys are all extremely good horse type players. They're carrying his team the entire season. And then he picks up his Morgan Riley, his power play quarterback defenseman. He gets another one here in Shea Theodore. Theodore's a little bit fickle. Sometimes he brings it, sometimes he doesn't in terms of fantasy production. He's a really good defenseman, but in terms of point producing and fantasy production, obviously Vegas was hurt last year a lot, so they didn't have a lot of their weapons for that power play, but didn't burn him too much there. Sam Reinhart right here in the 7th round, that's pretty good value as well. He picks up Nylander in the 9th. That's really good value for Nylander. Gets Ullmark here, so his is that his first goalie? That is his first goalie off the board, and he's getting him in the 10th round. And then he picks up Jari in the 12th round. So that's part of what we're talking about. Don't draft a goalie too high. He got two goalies that provided him plus 114 and plus 39 of value, and he got them in the 10th and 12th round. Again, these numbers are, the first row is player name and all this stuff. So, 10th and 12th round, excellent value for his goaltending. And then he just kind of, 3 rounds, he just didn't do a ton. Slavin's not that bad at that range, but Kubalik, I wouldn't have gone there. Wenberg, no idea why he went there. Not a household name on an expansion franchise with no offense. I wouldn't have gone there at all. But he kind of makes up for it with Dylan Larkin. He gets 96 positions of value with his last pick as well. So what you can take away from all of this, the guys who stuck a little bit closer to what my strategy is performed better in terms of how much value they gained from their draft. So these guys, he got, without these picks right here, these two guys that I zeroed out, because I would have just dropped them immediately if I were this guy. Just would have dropped them as soon as the draft was over. And if you did that, he was plus 61. If you didn't do that, he was minus 346. So, he didn't actually outdraft these guys. Brody actually had the best draft of the three guys, the three hosts of this show. So the guys, and again, he did more of what we were talking about. He got the elite puck moving defenseman. He got Darnell Nurse for hits and blocks, picked his first goalie in the 5th round, second goalie in the 8th round, and then another goalie in the 11th round. So that's pretty much exactly what I've been talking about in that first video on this channel. So 5th, and then 8th, and then 11th. So that's pretty much right in the line of where we're targeting goaltenders. And then he picks up deep value with centers like Pavelski. He gets a good player on a bad team in Timo Meier, a hits guy in Ristolainen. Kind of covers a little bit of everything here. So hopefully what this video did for you is showed you a little bit of what the draft looked like last year, where guys fell, where value could be had, because there were a lot of guys who ended up dropping quite a bit in the draft, and you could have had quite a bit of these guys. See if I can find something towards the end. So this is just D, but you can see like there's, Boquist, he was a pretty good goal scoring defenseman. Dobson still there. This was before that Dobson pick, as he was picking him actually. Mo Seider, now again, it's very difficult to predict that, but he was a very, very good defenseman last year. Jacob Trouba still on the board, way down. I think we're in the 16th round or something at this point in the video. Gudis, who we've talked about in the hits video, way down here. A lot of your hits guys are still on the board here. And this is, towards the back end of the draft. So a lot of the concepts that we've been talking about here on this channel, the guys who put most of those into play actually drafted better. And as you can see, we went through that, line by line. Brody and Avery had the two best. teams, in my opinion, in terms of, draft position and Yahoo and rank. It just depends on a lot of factors: who you start, who you sit, who you pick up on the waiver wire, and all that. But you're setting yourself up for success in your draft by trying to maximize value the way that these guys did. You see green at the top of the draft, you see green in the middle of the draft, you see green at the end of the draft. Whereas the guys who didn't do well, there's no green anywhere. There's no, until right here. Fiala's a good pick, Stützle, Dobson, but you're missing on a lot of these, these guys, and it's tough to factor in injuries. But basically, you want to make sure that you're at least maintaining value, like here with these top guys. It's tough to gain value with your number one pick, number 2 pick, but you want to maintain that value with those top guys, and then you want to try to add value wherever you can. And so the guys who followed more closely along with this data draft method ended up picking a better team and setting themselves up for success. So hopefully you got some value out of this video, and if you liked this style of content, leave a comment, because this was something completely different. We didn't necessarily just jump into a spreadsheet and look at the data, or jump into a dashboard and look at the data. But what we did do is find out what happened last year, knowing what we know now, and that can be very helpful for you going into this year trying to pick players as you enter into your draft. So hopefully this did provide some value for you, and if you did get some value, please share this with people that maybe are not in your league, people that you think might get some value out of this as well. Like and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. But thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.